Hi everyone. Today let's talk about Coca-Cola earnings. Then we'll talk earnings for tomorrow. Then we'll talk economic calendar just for a moment. Then we'll go over the charts. Then we'll talk about my pretty bad trading for today and then my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. Don't forget to check out the Patreon as well as the Twitter account. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day. The markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. Looking at Coke earnings, basically they crushed it. They beat on the top and bottom line. They continue to raise prices and demand continues to go up for them. Everything is going well here for Coca-Cola. You can see earnings per share, 68 cents compared to 64 cents. Revenue also beat by $160 million. Everything continues to go well here. Net sales rose by 5%, climbing 12% in the quarter. They reported 3% volume growth for sparkling drinks, and even Coke Zero grew by 8%. They also pointed out that oil and freight costs are down, allowing them to make a little bit more profits on their sales. But it is worth noting that they are in a long-term battle with the IRS, which has ruled that they owe $3.4 billion in taxes, which has now been slashed to $1.6 billion, but still a substantial number, which is a bit of a drag on the company right now. Looking at earnings for tomorrow, we have Microsoft, Google, Visa, Pepsi, McDonald's, UPS, Texas Instruments, New Era Energy, Verizon, Raytheon, GE, and a couple of other lesser companies, 3M, Sherwin-Williams, Chipotle, and General Motors. Tons of big companies coming out tomorrow. Most of those are after hours, but a couple of them are in the morning, like McDonald's, as well as UPS. So keep an eye on these and make sure you're comfortable with the positions you're holding into the Google and Microsoft announcements. Moving over to economic calendar, building permits come out at 9:30 tomorrow, as well as consumer confidence at 10 o'clock. New home sales at 10 o'clock during market hours, so keep an eye on these. Definitely could affect the markets. Building permits expected to go down substantially. Consumer confidence expected to step down just slightly. And similar thesis here on new home sales, small step down. Moving over to the charts here, starting with the S&Ps on the hour and the daily chart. Pretty choppy session. Came in and tested the lows from yesterday, tested the highs from yesterday as well, and ended up closing slightly above those highs. Rallying here a little bit after hours. Looks like the hourly 200 SMA continues to hold up the markets as an area of support. Momentum into the close is pretty bullish. Volume at the end of day was also bullish. Everything looks okay here on the shorter time frame. On the daily time frame, however, you can see momentum is still fading dramatically. If we continue on this trajectory, you would expect bearish volume tomorrow. RSI is below the SMA, so that gives us another indicator we might see a bit of a pullback. But we did end up getting a step up slightly here today, just 0.1% on the day. Moving over to the NASDAQ, I should have been basically at max profit, but I really just chopped myself up here. So when we took out yesterday's high, I got a little bit concerned. I rolled up into that. I thought we might be breaking up to around 318.50, but then we got a very, very strong rejection. You can see what that looked like here on the hourly chart. Broke through all the supports that I was watching, came all the way down to my next lower support. And then I didn't really capitalize on this support level as much as I should have. Ended up getting a pretty solid move of about $2 up to this mid-range. And then we finished very little changed on the day. So going into tomorrow, same thesis, continuing to watch this. I was also watching this kind of structure right here, which kind of looked like a bearish wedge, which is another reason I expected this to hold and maybe come back up into this zone. But as soon as we broke down here, now we're not really in much of a structure at all, right? So we're out of this falling bullish flag that we were watching, tested that area, and then we're back out of it. We're not in this wedge either. So right now, just chopping sideways from what I can tell. Momentum on the 4-hour is moving towards bullish, so that's interesting. You can see some pretty decent reversal legs here on the 4-hour chart. We're right at VWAP. We've closed pretty much right at it. 316.07 is VWAP. We're 3 cents above that here at the end of day after hours. So we'll see if that level holds, if we get a rejection from there and we take out this 313.92 level. If that happens, I'm looking at 310.80 as my next lower level, which does correlate with the bottom of this flag type setup. Like I said, it's kind of hard to determine because we made a higher high and a lower low on the day, which does make for some pretty difficult trading. Looking at the Russell and the Dow, you can see the Russell made a higher high as well, Once we broke out above yesterday's high, I thought we would be pushing up to 179.17, the next area of resistance, but we ended up rejecting from that level very strongly, ended up getting below 177.41. Tested that 55 EMA here on the 4-hour chart, which ended up being some decent support, and then we rallied into the close. Again, I should have left my positions alone, would have been in great position going into tomorrow. Unfortunately, I didn't do that, which ended up being a little bit of a loss. Looking at the Dow, you can see 55 EMA continues to be support here as well. Got above the 9 and 21 EMAs as well as VWAP, so it does look slightly bullish going into tomorrow. Momentum is moving into bullish territory as well. Fairly significant cross of the SMA on RSI. So overall, does look like it's going higher here in the short term. Moving over to Tesla and Apple, you can see Apple ended up testing yesterday's lows and rallied into the close, hitting VWAP here again at the end of day. Certainly could be an area of resistance. We'll be watching this tomorrow. And it kind of looks like we're stuck between VWAP and the 55 EMA. Momentum on the 4-hour chart moving slightly towards bullish, but RSI definitely looks weak. Tesla, on the other hand, made a lower low, had a pullback to VWAP, and now it looks like we're selling off again here after hours. Zooming out here, you can see we took out that midpoint, and this continues to look very bearish going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to Etsy and Microsoft, you can see Etsy, I still like this setup, continues to hold this 150 level, hit the 9 EMA on the daily chart once again, and then ended up being a bullish day on Etsy, outperforming the markets. Moving over to Microsoft, on the other hand, you can see this is breaking down here. We had a double top pattern, took out the midpoint here today, did find a little bit of support here at 279.28. And then got back above the 281.30 level. But overall, this looks bearish here now. It does look like we're coming back down to retest the 144 EMA down at 275. We'll see how that plays out with their earnings tomorrow. But this definitely looks bearish going into their earnings. Moving over to Amazon and LULU, you can see Amazon made this really big topping formation and then it had a huge move down. So it continued to swing up in the pre-market. Got all the way up to 109.22, talked about hitting that upper resistance before. Then we came all the way down to this lower support line at 105.20. So big swing early in the session. Then we closed very close to the lows. And this looks pretty weak here going into tomorrow's session. LULU, on the other hand, continues to make higher highs. Jumping in here a little bit to the hourly chart on LULU, you can see big push up in the early session, 2 hours of downward movement. Then we ended up closing lower than the open, so still a bullish day, but definitely a little bit weaker than what we've seen here recently. Moving over to Staples and Discretionary, you can see Staples continues this run up to 77.50. Discretionary through a wick through resistance, rejected all the way down to support, finished right in the middle, still wedging up here, definitely interesting. Waiting to see which way this breaks. Overall, still outperforming here on Staples. Moving over to semiconductors here on the hour and the daily, you can see we broke down below this formation, tested support here on the hourly chart. You can see the wick through that support level. We took out this lowest point from this formation, and we held that level, so still technically could bounce here, but momentum super bearish, RSI super bearish. Semiconductors still looking like they're ready to fall off here, quite a few points going into the rest of the week. Moving over to stocks above their 20, 50, and 200-day averages here, you can see 20-day average, slightly lower low. 50-day average actually showed some strength here today, so mixed results between these two for sure. 200-day average, again, lower closing price, but not a lower low compared to Friday. So overall, still mixed results in terms of breadth. Moving over to yields, you can see the 2-year and the 10-year both taking a pretty significant step down here today. Momentum on the daily charts, both moving towards bearish territory. RSI on the 2-year, very close to the 50 line and the SMA. RSI on the 10-year crossed the 50 line, but it's still at the SMA. Certainly could bounce here, but this momentum is stepping down pretty significantly. Looking at the 21 EMA here on the 10-year to see if we get a bounce. And looking at the 200 SMA here on the 2-year to see if we get a bounce from there. Overall, I would expect this to pull back a little bit more, which should provide a little bit of upside in equities. Moving over to the dollar here on the hour and the day, you can see we got a big move down on the day, which allowed equities to rally here into the close. Definitely interesting. Momentum on the daily chart stepped towards bearish. RSI crossing towards bearish here. Did not test the 101.25 level, waiting to see if that happens, if we get another bounce from that level and then a push higher. But right now, the dollar does look very weak going into tomorrow's session, which should allow markets to stay a little bit higher in my opinion. Moving over to JNK, you can see this continues to rally. We're at resistance here on the daily chart. Momentum turned bullish here again, crossed the SMA here on RSI. Waiting to see what happens. If this breaks out, then we might see some higher prices. But overall, JNK looks pretty strong going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to the VIX here, you can see we do have a short-term bullish type structure, continuing to make higher lows and higher highs. Daily momentum starting to move towards bullish. Still stuck below the SMA on the daily chart though. Until this gets above the 1850 level and holds above that level, I'm not sure we're really going to be seeing any major downside. But we are at this shorter term support, and maybe we see a little bit of a rally here on the VIX early in tomorrow's session. Moving over to my accounts here, you can see I definitely would have been fine in terms of closing price. My positions going into the day were perfectly set, but of course I messed them up. So you can see small loss here, not terrible. Markets were down 66 cents, and they're down a little bit more after hours. And I only lost $300 here, which is not terrible, but it is definitely worse than it should have been. In terms of my IRA, down $50, and I ended up in the same position going into the next 2 days as I had going into today. Again, closing price $177.45, definitely would have been fine. Overall, still generally neutral going into tomorrow, but I will highlight here, I do have 4 calls short going into tomorrow, and only 2 puts going into tomorrow here at 313. I am a little bit more bearish going into tomorrow's session than I was going into today's session. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of Coke earnings, or what you think is going to happen for Microsoft and Google tomorrow. Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.